Hi there. The other day or other week, I woke up from an amazing dream, the upshot of which was that it occurred to me like one of those aha moments on the emotional level, the intellectual level, the practical level, and the intuitive level, and no doubt the spiritual level, um, that at any time, um, by any means, um, soul or souls represented by these little dots could literally walk out of this prison, this world that is our prison, and literally any time. Sparks of transcendence is another way of looking at soul or souls. And for those who have soul awareness or suddenly get soul awareness through an experience of gnosis, um, literally we could go we anytime. And I'm not talking about, committing mass suicide or anything like that, which I refer you to absolutely my first video ever done when I talk about that immediately, because that's one of the dangers of a Gnostic cult, isn't it? That, people could just, get together and commit suicide and just think that a passing UFO is going to take them away from this veil of tears and this valley of death and suffering. It's not like that. But through soul awareness, literally, um, however we want to think of leaving, either we leave temporarily during dreams, or certain dreams anyway, or we leave permanently at death. And we, as the Bhagavad Gita talks about, you withdraw. At death, you withdraw from the world and you withdraw your last breath, and the soul leaves the body, leaves the confines of the physical, and even leaves the confines of duality and of human ethics arising from that duality, which I've discussed many times on this channel. Um, and all this is possible, in a twinkling of an eye. I can't clip my fingers today, but just in the twinkling of an eye, it can be done, and all of it is over, and we move on to a new transcendent realm of existence. Awareness sits at ananda, to put it in Brahmanistic terms. Perfect consciousness, perfect bliss, and perfect beingness. Uh, Were it not, in fact, for the principal, what I call F demons of this world. And I talked about 5 F demons in another video, but in fact, actually thinking about it more deeply, I think there are 6 F demons that guard the exits from this world. And they are demons of distraction. Um, and it's so easy to distract the consciousness of an individual from soul awareness, which is their ticket out of here. So very, very easy. Perhaps easier than it is for others, than it is easier for some than others. And I want to talk about very briefly this whole thing about demons. Um, because you could say, well, the classical idea of a demon is that it has some kind of causal effect on the universe and on the humanity and on individuals. So one might put the actual demon itself as a causal factor in the fire element here, or if we draw our little square of the 4 elements. But it's more complicated than that. For example, in the Earth quarter, we could talk a lot about genetics and genetic predisposition, and groups of chromosomes which predispose you to various behaviors and attitudes, even, and certainly physical ailments, for example. Um, and we also can think about the air element, well, which is our own cognition. And in cognitive behavior therapy, it's all about cognition and perception. Perception ruled by cognition, ruled by patterns of thought, some of which we have gotten from other people's attitudes, from our parents' attitudes, for example, and siblings' attitudes, and they have influenced us. So finally, we're thinking about the water element, which is, of course, we don't live on an island. We live in a relationship with the universe and with other people, and their predispositions to certain attitudes, which could be distracting, will distract us. One thinks of almost of like a tuning fork. Somebody kind of vibrates their tuning fork in your vicinity, and then you vibrate to that tuning fork. Unless you're very careful. So we have these four elements. We have genetics, we have the demon itself, and we have our own free will, our own cognition and perception, and we have the perception and emotions of others, which transmit themselves to us. And these combine together to create a sort of matrix of distraction, symbolized by the F demons, the six F demons, which I've illustrated here. Um, and because it's important to understand that the genetics, the cognitions, our own decisions, the perceptions and cognitions of others and their effect on us, they are all causal factors as well. But when we talk about demonic causal factors, I think what happens basically is that you have your own free will and you have your own consequences, and then you have the demon that's created by the genetics, the free will, and the emotions of others, and then that demon sets up a sort of feedback mechanism, whereby it begins something, but it also continues it, even to the extent of total obsession and addiction. So, having three causes which are in this world, and the demonic cause together, and the demon itself causes something which might be temporary to become permanent as a behavior pattern, or pattern of emotions, or pattern of cognitions and perceptions, from which it's very difficult to escape, of course, you see. And so these demons, for example, so we look at the six demons itself, for example, fury, which is, arising from the perception of scarcity and resentment against other people. You have an F demon for fury, and the F demon for fury, plus the genetics, the free will, and the emotions of others, and the universe itself, the environment in which we have the demon of fury operating. We start off with the demon of fury, but the point is that without this demon, perhaps the fury would be temporary. But with the demon, it can become a permanent item in our itinerary of reactions and actions. We become furious, and we become furious in our actions, and the demon feeds off this situation. So it's in its interest to continue the situation for as long as it possibly can, because it takes existence uh, from that situation. In your case, and then in the collective case, the F demon fury feeds off the fury of all creatures, sentient creatures, not just humans but animals as well, to become a permanent fixture in this world. So that's one example. So we have fury, and then we have we have um, yes, the extra one I wanted to talk about, well, was fantasy. But I'll come back to that. I mean, obviously, so that's fire, fury, and then water would be fearfulness. Fear is one of the great demons of this world. When you think about most wild animals, they're living in a state of fear, if not of fury. They're certainly of fear because there's so much in their environment to fear, and fear is the great motivator for a lot of the actions of wild animals. And if we look at people and collective communities, we see that fear, xenophobia, collective fear, individual fear, resulting in collective fear, fear in the arts, fear in computer games, for example. Um, fear is one of the things that is hugely powerful in our lives. And, from fear, will naturally result fury because, the best form of defense is attack. So you attack somebody out of fear in a lot of cases. And then we go on to the forlornness, which I've ascribed to the air element. Simply the forlornness, which is a sort of archaic word for depression, and we have a sort of existential depression at the human situation, and of the scarcity that is intrinsic to this world. And so we have the forlornness, which is, also forlornness means a sort of depression at something being lost as well. So we've lost something along the way, and we are forlorn about that. We've lost something, we can't get it back, we can't find it. So that's the sort of meaning of forlornness, as well as meaning also a general feeling of depression. And a lot of violence can arise from depression and addiction, obviously, and a depressive way of looking at things, which you could say Gnosticism is very depressive. It's a depression-based religion or spiritual path. Um, I don't know if that's quite true. It's more pragmatic way. It's more bordering on cynical, perhaps, but accepting life as it is, and it's not really any good to become depressed. It's just looking at life objectively. This is how it is, and this is how it's going to be in this particular world and the lower worlds of duality. Um, but there's forlornness. People can have a depression without really knowing why they're depressed. They're just depressed at the whole bloody bloody thing, the whole game of it. Um, and then we have frustration, which I've ascribed to Earth, which is basically, a frustration arising out an emotional reaction to the obstacles in life, the physical, practical obstacles which arise, and scarcity is one of the great obstacles, of course, arising in the world of duality. So frustration is more the sort of, where we feel weighed down by this world, and we want to break that door down. We want to, we want to kick against the pricks. We want to shout the odds occasionally, and so it all leads to fury. Actually, forlornness, frustration, fearfulness actually all result in fury, the furious actions that we take and reactions that we succumb to. And then I did talk about fantasy as well as being a great distraction. It's a bit complicated one, this, because fantasy, I suppose, arises from depression. We want to escape from our depression, so we fantasize about all sorts of things, and we make five from 2 plus 2 all the time, and we go in conspiracy theories, and we go into paranoia. We go into sexual fantasy. We go into delusions of grandeur. Putin trying to be the next Tsar of Russia or whatever. A depressive alcoholic fantasist, if ever there was one, with all due respect. And fantasy often is sort of backed up by kind of pseudo logic, and paranoia about things, and cognition, and looking at the worst of everything instead of the best of everything. Um, or just everything as it is. So fantasy, I looked at a big F demon, but fickleness as well. Fickleness, we all just sort of tend to kind of drift around, blunder into things. If something doesn't work, we give it up and try something else, and but in a very dispersed sort of way. So dispersion is outside of our fickleness. An archaic word, fickle, for actually referring to love, really, romantic love. We go from one person to the next, sort of serial monogamy, and we repeat the same mistakes with a new with a new with the new spouse, or new partner over and over. We get a new partner and we just repeat the same mistakes that we made with the last partner, and so it goes on and on, going round and round and round in a kind of sort of in a washing machine kind of way, and we're just stuck in this barrel which just keeps spinning us round and round on the emotional level. So these are the six F demons which I've kind of identified, and then go back to fear. I want a little note on fear. A lot of people talk about this thing about the state, the government rules us with fear. Um, it's a bit more complicated than that. There's certainly that comes into it. There are certainly completely made up stories, and things, beliefs, which are simply there to control us through fear. There's no doubt about that. But that only really accounts for 30% of the problem. The other 30% is the fact that the government's made up of people, and people are fallible, and people are paranoid, and people fantasize, and very often it's a sort of a governmental fantasy which arises from certain individuals, who basically are not doing it willfully. They're just doing it on a subconscious level. So you have governments which are acting on a sort of instinctual subconscious level, out of fear, but they don't realize that they are fearful of things. Um, and then finally, there's the things that really are threats, because obviously fear doesn't arise without from something. So there is this something. So there are things which really are threats to our health and well-being, and security, and stability. And these really refer to the something of which we are cognizant, or something of which we perceive there is a something there, and there is something which actually is threatening. And all animals recognize that certain things are really, really threatening. For example, some sort of so-called primitive animals, such as Hydra, which is a a very simple animal. It moves away from heat and strong light. It perceives them as being real dangers, because they really are real dangers. And so not always paranoia. It's not always fantasy. You can perceive a real threat, and governments can perhaps identify a real threat. But of course, the governments tend to mix it all up together. They mix their own paranoia, they mix the desire to be controlling, and they mix the real threats all up into a knot, of fear. It's very difficult to know, in fact, as a punter, as an ordinary person, what is real, what is not. And I suppose it's very hard, in a broader way, to know what is real, what is not, what is just being perceived as shadows, and what is actual light being cast on a real problem. So it's all mixed up together, the subconscious elements of government, the controlling elements of government, and the real threats, and their sometimes meager responses to a real threat, all mixed up together to cause governments to be perceived as causes, or nexuses of fear. But it's more complicated than that, really. And indeed, I suppose the government is a microcosm of the government of this world through the demiurge and his five demons, because these five demons are kind of arch demons. They are the ones that it's so simple, so easy for the F demons to distract us, to keep us in what I call a matrix of distraction, symbolized by this six-pointed star, which isn't quite a hexagram, but isn't the St. David's. It isn't quite a hexagram. I haven't completed. I haven't completed it for a reason, because it's dispersed. The energy is going everywhere. It's sort of chaotic. And if I completed the symbol, it would designate or symbolize order. But this is actually chaos. So the F demons are acting chaotically on us to create chaos and maintain chaos, which our genetics, our free will, and other people's problems are also mixed into that causal matrix of dispersion. But what to do about it? Obviously, I can't just leave you hanging like this to say, oh, it's just six demons and we can't do anything about it. There are lots of things we can do. We can go into the here and now. We can contemplate the fantastic and inspiring literature of Gnosticism. We can call upon help from the angels, from Christ, the avatar of the transcendent God, from the Holy Spirit. And we call upon these elements of transcendence to focus us on soul awareness. And when that becomes a thing that we do automatically, it could be that this regimen or this rule, Gnostic rules, I might say, will help us to cope with distraction, and eventually even to transcend distraction itself, and therefore transcend this world. Um, but of course, there is an element, factor infinite and unknown, which is gnosis itself. Within this world, one of these souls or several of these souls can have a Gnostic moment or a Gnostic experience, which will mean that all the distractions of the F demons will simply dissolve in an instant, and the soul can literally walk out of prison. Literally, there'll be no more walls or locks or keys or chains. They will all just dissolve away. But for me, anyway, I'm very much distracted by the F demons. Um, you know, I'm distracted by everything really, avarice and frustration and fear and fury and I find it very very difficult to cope with living in this particular world. And then by this world, of course, we mean the world of nature and the world of mankind, which is most of the time in reaction to the chaos of nature. So these deep. I think some kind of the final thought I will leave you with is also, I think the F demons are part of who we are, and perhaps there is an argument for shaking hands with each of these F demons. So we shake hands with fantasy, we shake hands with fury, etc. Because it's a way of coming to terms and gaining insight. Most people are not aware of these F demons, but if you become aware of them, there's a fantastic sculpture in the Cairo Museum in Egypt of Set, which is the Lord of Chaos, shaking hands with Horus, which is the Lord of light and order, and Set is chaos and darkness, and they're shaking hands together, because that sort of could be part of it as well. That instead of bemoaning duality, instead of being victims of duality, we become, I don't know what the word is really, become aligned duality or insightful of duality, and accepting of duality, and therefore by these means transcendent of duality. So we don't become, we can't get away from duality by, by fighting, fighting it. It's not a computer game. We're not Laura Croft, or, we're not going on a mad demon hunt. We're in fact shaking hands with the demons, really, interacting or we're creating a sort of, as I might say, an interface between us and what we could be with what we are, because we are these F demons. The F demons are within us. We can't escape that because we live in the world of duality. But we can also transcend them through insight, through understanding. To understand is to forgive, and to forgive is to take away the energy that these F demons ultimately wield within the world of duality.